Ladies and gentlemen, the alle Drossers, es gewähnt in Jiddisch, ich will jetzt der Azoi wie an Oiswov, aber ich will überzählen am Meise. Ich habe gelernt in Yeshivat Mir, es ist gewähnt dort in einer Woche, amerikanische Woche, von der Lower East Side. Ein Tag, hat gefragt, eine Bombekasche, und der Rebbe, hat gesagt, das ist eine Kasche. Man darf fragen, Reb Shmuel Birnbaum. Geht zu der Rosh Yeshiva und fragt ihm den Bombekasche. Dem Ashkenazische Boche hat gesagt zu dem Rebbe, ich rede nicht kein Jiddisch. Der Rebbe fragt, die alle Talmidim, darf mit Turgemen. Wer redet Jiddisch da? Ich habe gemeint, so aufhelfen, noch ein Jid. Zusammen wir gegangen zu Shmuel Birnbaum. Der Mirror Rosh Yeshiva, Zeichet Tzadik Lebracha. Der Boche hat geanfangen fragen dem Kasche, a Bombekasche, in mittens Kasche, gewalt. Und ich habe mit Targum sein, Wort. Der Rosh Yeshiva hat gesagt, a minute, wart a minute. Ein askenazische Boche, was keinisch kein Jiddisch. Und der swadische Boche ist eine mit Turgemen. Muss doch sein Mashiach-Zeiten. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here with you tonight. I tell you the truth, you might not believe me on this. I looked forward to this event. This event to me is a speaker's dream. And I want to tell you why. You come to a Hamish Oilam, and you know that Kamelnish, nobody has any smartphones. So like this, nobody saw any of my clips over the years. So tonight I'm coming frisch ahead. I mean, I'm coming, anything I can say is going to be heard for the first time. You don't understand what a taiva you already did for me. I'd like to open up tonight with a fantastic Maisa. Many of you heard of a mensch, a Frayid, by the name of Howard Schultz. He's the CEO of Starbucks. Years back, Mr. Schultz and his team, they had a very legendary and famous trip to Eretz Yisrael. And on that trip, they came to the Mirror Rosh Yeshiva, Reb Nosson Tzvi Finkel, Zechet Tzadik Lebracha. Howard Schultz, sitting there with his chevra, a billionaire. And he's sitting now in front of Reb Nosson Tzvi. And Reb Nosson Tzvi turns to Mr. Schultz, and he says to him and the Starbucks team, chevra, tell me, what did we learn from the Holocaust? One guy says, what did we learn from the Holocaust, Rabbi? Never again? Rabbi says, okay. Another guy pipes up, you know what, Rabbi, we learned from the Holocaust? We need an army. Jews need to know how to fight. The rabbi said, okay. Mr. Schultz saw that that's not where Rav Nosson Tzvi was looking for. So finally he leans in and he says, Rabbi, tell us. What is it that we learned from the Holocaust? Says Rav Nosson Tzvi, we learned from the Holocaust that 5 Jews can sleep under one blanket in one bed and make room for all of them. They looked at him. Wow, was he right? When those trains pulled up to Auschwitz, you might not know this, but every 5th Jew that got off the train was handed a blanket. The first 4 guys before him was not. And then after they were stripped of everything in the world, from their clothing down to their possessions, given these little cotton striped pajamas to live in the freezing, frigid winters of Europe, the one that was given the blanket had to make the biggest decision in his life. Does he share the blanket with the other 4 guys who didn't get? And 9 out of 10 Yidden, 9 out of 10 Jews, shared the blanket with the other 4 guys that did not get. And they huddled together and they shook night after night together under one blanket. Says Rav Nosson Tzvi to Howard Schultz, Mr. Schultz, you know what we learned from the Holocaust? 5 Jews can fit in one bed under one blanket. And then he looks at him dead in the eye. And he says, Mr. Schultz, Hashem gave you a blanket. Go out and spread it over Klal Yisrael. Howard Schultz was so taken by these words. He said, wow, Rabbi, you hit us so hard. Rabbi, you're right. I am going to spread my blanket over the Jewish people, and I'm starting with you today. He pulls out his checkbook, and he signs a blank check, and he turns to Rav Nosson Tzvi Finkel, and he hands him the checkbook with the pen, and he says, Rabbi, fill out the check for anything you want. Anything you want, carte blanche. Rav Nosson Tzvi says, anything? Anything I want? He says, anything. Rabbi Isai, at that time, the Murray Yeshiva had a $2 million budget a month. Rav Nosson Tzvi was stricken with Parkinson's disease. His hand was shaking. His hands couldn't stop trembling. He picks up the pen off the table. His hand is shaking with the checkbook of a billionaire. And he begins to fill out the check. And he writes out a number. And he fills it out. And with his hand shaking, with the last tug, he pulls the check out of the book, leans over, and with his hands vitally shaking, he hands it to Mr. Schultz. And he says, here, Mr. Schultz. Howard Schultz looks at the check that the rabbi just filled out. And he sees that he filled it out for $1,200. The billionaire looks at the rabbi and says, Rabbi, that's it? The rabbi said, you told me any amount I want, for anything I want. He says, that's right. Says Rav Nosson Tzvi, take that check, go across the street to from the Murray Yeshiva. There's a Judaica store. Use that check to buy yourself a pair of tefillin and put it on every single day. Do that for me. That's godless. You see, most people, when they're handed a blank check from a billionaire and they're told any amount of money, carte blanche, they would be thinking in their minds, how much can I take from this guy? You know what a gadol was thinking? How much can I give this person? How much can I give? How much can I give? That's godless. That's the way we measure gedolim. By selflessness, by a tremendous act of giving, but more than anything, by the constant search of looking to change the world of people by giving them heart and soul every single day. Give me another opportunity. Give me another shot. Let me be able to light up somebody. Let me be able to bring another smile to another Yid. That's godless. That's the way we measure godless. Do you know what we made the measure of the godless of people? We measure the godless by the giving. We measure the godless by the chesed. We measure the godless by the unconditional love. It's amazing to me, because tonight I'm surrounded by gedolim, people's lives who are dedicated selflessly to give and give and give. Unbelievable. Rabbi Isai, what is the quintessential chesed? What's the greatest chesed? I don't have to tell you the Gemara in Sanhedrin. The Gemara told us, Ma ya'aseh Adam b'cheblei Mashiach. Ma ya'aseh Adam v'yinatzel mecheblei Mashiach. Ya'asok b'Torah u'b'gemilut hasadim. What is the word ya'asok? Does ya'asok mean to do? It could have said ya'aseh. The word ya'asok. Let me tell you what the word ya'asok is. I have a Syrian Lebanese shul. I have 150 guys from ages 16 to 32. The 33-year-olds is already our Zakanim. That's the shul we run. You want to know what ya'asok is? Let's bring it over to business for a minute. Let me show you what ya'asok is. Ya'asok in business is the business guru. He's the guy that wakes up in the morning and he's thinking business. He's the guy that all day, living minute to minute, his business. He's the guy that at night, he goes to sleep, puts his head on the bed. What is he thinking? Business. That's ya'asok. This guy is living his business 24/6. That's it. That's ya'asok. If that's ya'asok in business, that's ya'asok in every other place as well. Ma ya'aseh Adam v'yinatzel mecheblei Mashiach ya'asok b'Torah u'gemilut hasadim. To live in Torah, to live chesed, but in a way that you're living it 24/7. How do you live chesed 24/7? How do you do that? How do you physically possibly be ya'asok in chesed to be saved from cheblei Mashiach? And ladies and gentlemen, make no mistake. Right now, we're right moments before the birth pangs of Mashiach. We're holding by the last moments right in the thick of the cheblei Mashiach. What is it at this minute? How does a person take advantage of this promise, this havtacha? Ya'asok b'chesed. How do you do it? How do you live it 24/7? Make a chesed guru out of you. How do you do that? What's the greatest chesed that a person can do? I walk around tonight, I bet you, we'd ask people this question, you get 100 different answers. And they're all good. Because mistama, they're all chesed. But that wasn't my question. My question was, what is the greatest chesed a person can do? And then maybe we can figure out how to get that done 24/7 and go on with the ya'asok. Said the great mashkiach of the Mir, Reb Yeruchim Levavitz, Zechet Tzadik Lebracha. He said, you know what the greatest chesed that was recorded in history? Who would you say? I bet you, you would say Avram Avinu, I bet you. The Amud HaChesed. But that's not what Rabbi Yeruchim says. Rabbi Yeruchim says that there was a chesed that's recorded in Tanakh that was the greatest chesed, and when you see the reward, you'll understand why. And you know who he's referring to? He's referring to Ruth. Ruth Hamoavia. Chesed. What chesed? What type of chesed did she do? When she was about to leave Naomi, Naomi gives her a bracha. And the bracha was, Yas imachem chesed. Hashem should pay you back for the incredible chesed that you did. Did you see, from the entire Megillas Rus, did you see any chesed? What's the chesed she's talking about? But by the way, mind you, says the great Rabbi Yeruchim, you better figure this one out, because this is the greatest chesed of history. This is the quintessential chesed. This is the mafteach to the sugya of Ya'asok b'chesed. So what is it? Says the great Rabbi Yeruchim, Ruth sacrificed like no one else for a bayis nemon b'Yisrael. the bayis that she built, the family she sacrificed for, and later on the family that she built temporarily with Boaz, was a chesed that was the quintessential chesed of a Jewish home. A mother and a father that was dedicated 24/7 with unconditional sacrifice, unconditional love, to make that home the most perfect home, the way Borei Olam gave it to them. Says Rabbi Yerucham, Rabbi Isai, I beg of you, open your hearts, hear what I want to tell you tonight. There's a nekuda chashuva here that I'm hoping you'll take home with you. Says Rabbi Yerucham, the chesed that Ruth HaMoaviyah did for the sacrifice of her home to build up and to bring out a Bayis Neman of Klal Yisrael was the reason that she was zeichet to be the Baba, the grandmother of David Malka Mashiach. You know what it is to be zeichet, to be the grandmother of Mashiach? I'm sure you spoke to many people. They talked to you all about the unbelievable yichus, the lineage they came from. Do you want to talk about lineage? Could you imagine being the grandmother of Melech HaMashiach, the grandmother of David HaMelech? Do you know why she was zeicha to that? Says the great Rabbi Yerucham Levovitz, she was zeicha to be the grandmother of Mashiach because of the chesed she did at home. Because that is the quintessential chesed that one can do. A chesed of yasoik. You see, because that chesed doesn't come at will. That chesed doesn't come with convenience. That chesed doesn't wait for you to be ready to do it or not do it. That chesed is standing on the mishmar of the home of Klal Yisrael 24/7 and delivering heart and soul to the home, to the children, to a husband, of whatever is needed, no matter what is asked. That's a chesed that earned her to be the grandmother of Mashiach Tzidkenu. Rabbi Isai, listen to me well. We know a lot of good people that are great parents. We know a lot of good people that are great parents, great husbands, great wives, great fathers, great mothers. But their grandkids were not Melech HaMashiach. But they sacrificed. And they really worked hard to bring up a good home. And they really worked hard to give their kids everything of the best that they could. And yet, they did not have a grandson, Melech HaMashiach. Why was Ruth's chesed in sacrificing for her home on a constant, unconditional basis, the chesed that got her to be the grandmother of David Malka Mashiach? There was something there that was special. Rabbi Isai, open your hearts. Please, let me tell you this with Baksena. I want you to hear this well so that you'll walk out tonight and you'll hold this on the way home. The answer is because Ruth was put in an impossible position. It was a pasuk in the Torah. Amoni umoavi lo yavo b'kahal Hashem. Lo yavo Amoni umoavi b'kahal Hashem. You can't come in. You're not accepted to Klal Yisrael. Ruth. Naomi explained to her, you come from a nation that cannot be converted to Judaism. You have no shot at bringing up a Jewish home. A Yiddish shtub will never be your future. You're not allowed in. You'll never be brought into Klal Yisrael. You can't go up against a pasuk. It's Xeris HaKosov. It's a pasuk. Lo yavo amoni moavi b'kahal Hashem. Do you know what her answer was? The door was literally slammed in her face. It was made impossible for her to bring up a Jewish home. Do you know what her answer was? Amech, Ami, Elokaich, Elokai. I will not stop. I will give everything and beyond to bring up a Jewish home. This chesed belongs to me. And I will not take no for an answer. And I will not back down from this impossible looking position that I was put in. And she was so eisen, she was so ironclad on this disposition, on this position, that she was going to do whatever it takes, even in an impossible position, to bring up the most beautiful home in Klal Yisrael, that the Ribbono Shel Olam sent down a new drasha. Would you believe this? A new drasha. Amoni v'lo Amoniyah. Moavi v'lo Moaviyah. Only the men cannot be converted. But in that generation, Ruth stood on an impossible situation and didn't budge. Put her bitachon in Hashem. And the Eibishter answered in part. And the Chachamim of that door came up with a new drasha that the women could be allowed into Klal Yisrael from Ammon and Moab. Ruth HaMoaviyah. Because she wouldn't take no for an answer. Because she wouldn't back down. Because she understood, impossible enough, impossible or not, let the chips fall where they may. I am going to bring up a Yiddish home. I'm going to make sure it's the most magnificent. Even if you put my back against the wall and you made it an impossible situation, the Eibishter is going to help me to make this, and it's going to be the most perfect outcome possible. And take a look what happened. David, Malka, Mashiach. Not bad for a home that started out almost impossible. Look what came out. Fantastic. Rabbi Say, I want to explain to you how powerful this concept is. How powerful when someone was put in a matziv that was very difficult and even looked almost impossible. And how they stood ironclad and showed and demonstrated that they're ready for the fight. And they're going to give everything they have, and the Eibishter is going to help them beyond their mental capacities. And the totzaot are beyond words. And I believe, I really do, that we learn out if Ruth was put in an impossible position with her family, and she stood steadfast, and she gave and fought to bring up a magnificent home later on, and she was zeichet to Melech HaMashiach, I believe that that's why in this last door, right before the coming of Mashiach, there are so many families with so many children that need extra love and care. Because if you want this door to bring Mashiach, you need the unbelievable chesed of Ruth to be the mother to give birth to a door of Mashiach. Every family that goes up against the challenge of Ruth that needed to give everything in sometimes positions that were felt to be impossible. Eibishter, you put me in a position I don't know how to handle. I don't know what to do. And the Eibishter says, let me see. Are you going to back down? Or are you going to be mechazik? And you're going to stand up. And you're going to say, Eibishter, thank you. If Ruth was ready to give everything, to fight for her family in an impossible position, and she was zeichet to Melech HaMashiach, then I'm going to do the same. And I'm going to be one of those families that is going to be zeichet to bring Melech HaMashiach in this generation. I don't understand how these things work. But I had a Zoom meeting with one of the founders, with Reb Shulam, with Rabbi Oberlander. And I'm sitting there on the Zoom meeting, and I'm standing through this virtual window looking at a Yid that every gasp of breath was with Mesiras Nefesh. And I said to myself, Duvi, Kol HaNishama Tahalel Ka Haleluka Al Kol Nishima Unishima. On every breath, this man fights to tell me another link of this amazing organization, HCS. Another link, another faction. What they do, maybe what they don't do. I mean, I know everyone here knows this already. I was looking through a few of the names. Chayenu, Champion, Gesher, Yeshivas Or Hayoshar, Chaburas Or Havir, Mechon Lev Seminary. They have a men's day here, a women's day here. They have a sleepaway camp. Machane Levavi, Camp Machon Lev. And he couldn't catch his breath quick enough to tell me the next organization of Chesed that this HCS is delivering to the community on all family support. I said, Eibishter, this guy is fighting for every breath to bring another organization of Chesed. HCS is the mother organization. It's an umbrella. But underneath her, a fantastic amount of organizations that work in brilliant common unison and ground to be able to bring family services that no other community has even heard of. And he's fighting for every breath. That's what I mean to stand up and fight. That's what I took the chizuk of that unbelievable call. We take advantage and we take example. I saw up in front of me on the back, it said HCS, unconditional parenting. HCS, unconditional parenting. HCS, unconditional loving parenting. They fought and they showed you how to fight. They showed you this incredible chesed. Please let me tell you just a small clip. My father, Yitzchak ben Shushan, Ad 120, he came over with the Mir Yeshiva at the age of 13 years old. Rabbi Kalmanovich, Zechet Tzadik Libracha, Rabbi Avram, he went to Morocco. He brought back a group, boys 13 years old. He saw what the Alliance was doing in Morocco, and he brought them back to America, to the Mir Yeshiva. And each one of these boys became Rabbanim. He saved these families. But he put inside of them this incredible love for Torah and for Gemilas Chasadim. I want to tell you that recently, my father was going for a routine, small procedure. He had a blockage in his leg. They took a local anesthetic. They were simply just going to open the blockage. That's it. Open the blockage. It was supposed to be a 25-minute procedure, in and out of the hospital, done. As the doctor started the procedure, something went wrong. And with whatever that instrument he used to open the blockage, he ended up hitting something that caused internal bleeding. Suddenly, my father didn't know what was going on. A bunch of doctors come running into the room. They literally jumped on him. They threw something under his tongue, and they told him, Mr. Ben Susan, take this quick if you want to save your life. We need to save your life. We need to operate. We need to put you out. My father didn't know what was going on. This was a 25-minute procedure. What happened? They threw something under his tongue. He told me he was out. They did this. They opened up his leg. They did the procedure. They did the operation. They stopped the bleeding, Baruch Hashem. But hours later, when he came to, he couldn't see. He opened his eyes and he couldn't see. He starts screaming to the doctor, "Doctor, I can't see. What happened?" They take him in for an MRI, and they realize that through the trauma of whatever that mishap of the operation was, he suffered a stroke and he lost his vision. When we, the children, heard this, you don't understand. That phone call. We came running to Brooklyn. We sat by my father once he came home, and I remember walking into the room, and my father didn't even know I entered the room. I walked up to him, "Abba, Abba." He looks around, "Duvi." I had to walk right up, literally put my nose in front of his nose just for him to be able to see me. He couldn't see anything but what was exactly right in front of his face. No peripheral vision, nothing, just what was in front of his face. And even that was blurry. I started being mechazik him. "Abba, don't worry. The Eibishter is going to give you back your vision. Abba, don't worry. These things sometimes with Rachmei Shamayim tend to come back. Abba, don't worry. We're put here in an impossible position, but we're not going down without fighting. We're fighters. The Eibishter puts us in these positions because he wants us to stand up and fight. He wants us to see the Mesiras Nefesh because that's the recipe for greatness." I said, "Abba, you'll see." A week later, Kollel starts. I know how down my father was. He can't go to Kollel, the opening day of the Zman. He already had a chavrusa picked out. They were starting a new Masechta Baba Kama. Bein Azdorim, I called up my parents and I said, "Ma, Abba's probably very depressed. He didn't go to Kollel this morning." She says to me, "Didn't go to the Kollel this morning? You know your father? You know how stubborn he is? You think your father didn't go to Kollel this morning?" He says, "You know what happened after your father davened?" He picks himself up, he starts feeling the walls of the house, and he makes his way to the front door. He somehow or other finds his jacket and puts it on. He finds his hat and puts it on. And he starts feeling his way quietly, shtil ahay, because he knew if my mother would hear him moving, he's finished. He'd make his way to the doorknob. He starts playing and chiseling with the doorknob, jiggling it to get it open quietly. My mother comes running out. She says, "Yitzchak, where are you going? You can't see 2 inches in front of you. What are you doing?" He says, "I'm going to Kollel." "You going to Kollel? You going to Kollel? What are you going to Kollel? You can't see 2 inches in front of you. What are you going to do in Kollel? You can't see the Gemara. You can't see the Chavrusa. You can't learn. How are you going to go to Kollel?" He says, "I don't know. But I'm going to Kollel." And she said, "Okay, you want to be like that? Go to Kollel." She takes him by the arm, puts him in the car, drives him to Kollel. B'nai Kollel come out. They take him inside, and they sit him down in front of the Gemara. I said, "Ma, you're joking me." He says, "No. Speak to your father." He hands him the phone. I said, "Abba, really? Don't you want to take a few weeks just to remedy?" I said, "Abba, what happened?" He says, "I sat down in my seat. I couldn't learn the Chavrusa. I couldn't see a thing. Abba, I opened the Gemara to Dav Beis Amud Aleph. And I looked down. And I said, Eibishter, I am not moving from this seat until you let me see this Gemara. You're not going to close the door on me. You're not going to put me in a possible position and think that I'm going to walk out without fighting. Eibishter, I want to see the daf. He said to me, Duvi, you're not going to believe me. But I stood there and I said, Eibishter, please, let me just see the page. Just the page. The outline. I looked down, and you're not going to believe this. I saw this island in the middle of the page, an outline of black. And then I started seeing little islands on the right side by the seam of Rashi, and on the left side, Tosfos. And I said, Eibishter, thank you. I can see the page. I can see the page. Eibishter, The first word. Just the first word. The first word in every Mishnah, in the beginning of every Masechta, the word is enlarged. It's a big word. Hey, Mishnah, just give me the big word. Just give me the big word. Just the first word. Give me the word. Hey, Mishnah, I'm not moving from here until you give me my sight back. You are not closing me out of my Torah. Give me the first word. He says to me, Duvi, I'm telling you, you're not going to believe me. I looked down and I saw the grace of the big word, arba. He said, thank you, Eibishter. You gave me that first word. Eibishter, can you give me another word? Just one more word? Maybe one small word. Can you give me another word? One more word. He says, Duvidal, I looked down and I saw the word avot. Eibishter, thank you. You gave me a small word. I can see a small word. I'm begging you, give me one more word. Give me one more word. I'm not moving from here. Give me another word. Eibishter, I want to learn. He says, I saw the word nizikin. And then I saw the shor. And then I saw the bar. And then I saw the maveh. And then I saw the hever. He says, I started to cry. And in the prisms of the water of my tears, I looked down and I saw line after line. And with the dema'ot, I began to learn. In 1 hour, I finished the Amud. And at the end of the Seder, I finished the Daf. Not bad for a blind man who wouldn't take no for an answer. Hey, Bishta, you put me in an impossible position. At least that's the way it seemed. But you waited for me to react. You put Ruth in an impossible position, but you waited for her to react. And the moment we got up, and the moment we fought, and the moment we showed that we're not going to settle down. You're not going to hold me from my chesed. But this is a family that I'm going to raise, and I'm going to raise them with an asek of chesed, 24/7. And these are the families that give over the birth of Mashiach. That was the story of Ruth, and that's the story of Acharit HaYamim. Ladies and gentlemen, the Eibishter should give all of us great siyata d'shmaya. Because know this, everything you're putting in is bringing all of us closer. And know this, everything you're putting in, those children will never forget you. Like my friend Rabbi Ammon told me on the way back from Lakewood, as he's driving down Staten Island Expressway. He says, every year I go to my mother-in-law's grave on Erev Rosh Hashanah. That year I went a week early because we were by a wedding in Brooklyn. On the way back to Deal, I turned to my wife. I said, honey, we're coming back in a week. We're here already. Let's just go to the Beis HaChaim. Let's go to your mother-in-law. Let's to your mother. Let's go. Let's go daven by her now. Why schlep back? We pulled out of the exit, came to the Beis HaKvaros. I stood there. It was a week early. I wasn't supposed to be there, but why not? And he says, just then I see in the distance that there's a bunch of boys, tuxedos. They're standing around a coffin. I turned to my wife. I said, something's wrong. The coffin's on the ground. These guys are standing around. Nobody's doing nothing. Nothing. Rabbi Ammon says to his wife, 1 minute, I'm going over there for a minute. Let me just see what's going on. He goes over to the guys. He says, Chevre, what's going on? Why is the coffin sitting here? No one's doing nothing. Why isn't there a kvura? Why are you waiting around? And the boy says, Rabbi, we have no idea what to do. The funeral home dropped our dad right off here next to the hole, and they told us, say a few prayers, and the guy on the tractor, he's going to just push the dirt in right after you put the coffin in. We don't know what to do. Rabbi Ammon says, seriously? Wow, this is ridiculous. I wasn't supposed to even be here today. I come to the cemetery every year a week later, Erev Rosh Hashanah. I'm here a week early only because of the wedding. Now I see why the Eibishter put me here. He turns to the boys. He says, guys, okay, let's see. What do we have here? He starts counting 5 boys, and there were 4 different family friends. Rabbi Ammon says, HCS Amecha, Uvarach es nachla ad oilam. I'm number 10. Wow, I'm mashlim the minyan. Okay, guys, listen, grab the ropes. They slipped it under the coffin, little by little, hoisted it down into the hole. Rabbi Amin grabs the shovel, covers the coffin, turns to the boys. Okay, guys, chavod, kaddish, yitkadal v'yitkadash. Go ahead. The boys look at him. Rabbi, what? Kaddish, chavod, yedat, yitkadal v'yitkadash. What? He says, you don't know what kaddish is? Come. He pulls out a siddur. He hands it to him. Go ahead, kaddish. Say, Rabbi, we don't know how to read Hebrew. Seriously? No, we never went to yeshiva. You never went to yeshiva? Okay. Repeat after me. Rabbi Amin said the Kaddish, word for word, line for line. And the boys, the sons, repeated after him, word for word. And he said Kaddish with the minyan. He turns to the boys and said, okay, guys, we said Kaddish. Grab a shovel. Let's finish the mitzvah. Fill up the hole with the rest of the dirt. No, Rabbi, come on. We rented the tuxes. We don't want to get it dirty. Let Leroy over there on the tractor. He's going to come pull it in. What's the problem? He says, don't give the mitzvah away. This is your father. Nah, Rabbi, come on. He says, I'll lead by example. He grabs a shovel. He starts filling up the rest of the hole. He turns around. And like they say in Brooklyn, they were gone. Gone. He says, guys, come back. Nah, Rabbi, leave it. Let the guy in the tractor do it. Rabbi Amin single-handedly filled the entire hole by himself. And at that minute, he whistles over to the guy in the tractor. The guy comes running out, and the rabbi says, go ahead, you can finish the job. He says, Rabbi, what's there to finish? You did the whole thing by yourself. You might as well put the nameplate on as well. Rabbi Amin says, okay. He hands him the nameplate. The rabbi looks at the name. He says, huh, wow. Josh Pollock? Who is that? He takes the nameplate and puts it on the dirt. And he says, well, Josh, I tried my best. At least I got your boys to say Kaddish with a minyan. I wasn't supposed to be here today. Now, Shamayim, they put me here a week early. I was mashlim the minyan. They said Kaddish. I tried my best. He turns around, goes back to his wife. He tells his wife the whole Maisa. She couldn't believe it. Rabbi Amin goes back to Deal, New Jersey. And that was it. A month or so later, Rabbi Amin was by a wedding, and he bumped into one of his old rabbeim. And he said, Rebbe, you got to hear this. He was the administrator of the yeshiva that he went to. He says, Rebbe, you got to hear this. I wasn't supposed to be by the cemetery. I was there a week early. I ended up burying this guy, Josh Pollock. Crazy story. I was number 10. I wasn't even supposed to be there. The administrator of the yeshiva of Baltimore turns to him and says to him, what was the name of the guy? He says, you heard me, Josh Pollock. His jaw dropped. He says, you don't know who that is? He says, no, who is that? Rabbi Amin, you don't know who that is? He says, no, I don't know who that is. The administrator sits back and he says, Rabbi Amin, you come from out of town. And you know good and well that when you were growing up, the town that you were in, they had no yeshiva. They had nothing but a shul. And when the boys got to 13 years old, they decided, what are we going to do with our boys? There's no yeshiva. We got to send them out of town to yeshiva. Some boys they sent to Rabbi Davis in Brighton Beach in those years. Some boys they sent to Tarvadas. And some boys they sent to Baltimore. But who's going to pay? There's pnimiyah, there's dormitory, there's flights, there's tuition. And many of the parents, they didn't even know what a yeshiva was. So the Kehillah decided they're going to wake one Shabbos, that they're going to raise all the money. And they made this huge kiddush. And they announced, sponsor a boy to yeshiva Shabbos. When people heard food, they all came out. The whole Kehillah came out. He says, that Shabbos, after everybody ate, they called up the boys. We lined up all the boys in front by the Aron Kodesh. And the president of the shul walked up to the first boy. Who's going to sponsor this boy to yeshiva? And one guy raises his hand. Who's going to sponsor this boy to yeshiva? Another guy raises his hand. And he says, Rabbi Amin, when it came to your turn, Josh Pollock sponsored you. see, when you needed him, he was there for you. And the Eibishter made sure that years later, when he needed you, you would be there for him. The Eibishter doesn't forget the unbelievable chesed, with Mesiras Nefesh, that's done in impossible positions. That's a chesed that brings about the David Malka Mashiach. These are the families that their chesed of Ruth brings about and will bring David Malka Mashiach. But know that all these years that you're pouring heart and soul into these families, into these kinderlach, you were there for them and you never back down. And the Eibishter will make sure that they'll remember and they'll always be there for you. Thank you for listening.